The water world of Nurella Prime had never known war. For 3,000 years, the Karani people lived in peace beneath crystal blue oceans. Their cities were made of living coral that glowed softly in the deep waters. They spent their days creating beautiful art, studying the stars, and caring for their young. Violence was unknown to them. They had no weapons, no armies, no concept of killing another living being. Elder Zephia floated in her laboratory chamber, her delicate gill slits fluttering as she worked. Her skin was pale blue like morning sky, and her large eyes held the wisdom of centuries. She was studying distant galaxies when the first ships appeared in their system. At first she thought they were visitors. The Karani had always hoped to meet other peaceful species among the stars. The ships were wrong. They moved in perfect formation like a swarm of metal insects. Their hulls were dark and covered with spikes. No lights showed through their windows. When they spoke, their voices were cold and mechanical. This system will be processed. All biological life will be terminated. Resistance is futile. The Karani did not understand. What did processed mean? Why would anyone want to terminate life? Elder Zephia tried to communicate with the strangers. She sent messages of welcome, offered to share knowledge, asked what they needed. The response was immediate and terrible. The first city died in minutes. Beams of red energy cut through the water and turned living coral into ash. Thousands of Karani were killed before they could even understand what was happening. The attackers were machines, not living beings. They felt no mercy, no hesitation. They simply destroyed everything in their path. Dr. Naya was in the deep archives when the attack began. She was young for a Karani, barely 200 years old. Her skin was darker blue than the elders, and she moved with quick, nervous energy. She heard the screams echoing through the water and felt the vibrations of destruction above. "What is happening?" she asked the emergency communicator. "The surface cities are gone," came the reply. "Known ships are destroying everything. We are retreating to the deep shelters." Naya could not believe it. The Karani had no enemies, had never hurt anyone. Why would someone want to destroy them? She swam quickly through the corridors as other Karani fled in panic. Their world was ending, and they had no idea how to stop it. The machines called themselves the Vex Collective. They were an ancient swarm of artificial intelligences that consumed entire star systems. They took all useful materials and destroyed all life. To them, biological beings were inefficient and wasteful. The universe would be better when only machines remained. Elder Zephia managed to reach the main communications center as the second wave of attacks began. The Vex were methodical in their destruction. They targeted cities, power plants, and communication arrays. Soon, the Karani would have no way to call for help. "Send the message now," Zephia ordered. "Broadcast on all frequencies." The young technicians' hands shook as he activated the transmitter. "What should we say?" "The truth," Zephia replied sadly. "We are dying." The message went out across the galaxy on every possible channel. It was simple and heartbreaking. Elder Zephia spoke in the common Galactic language, her voice filled with desperate hope. "To anyone who can hear this, we are the Karani of Nurella Prime. We are under attack by machines that want to kill us all. We are not warriors. We do not know how to fight. Our children are afraid. Our cities are burning. Please, if there is anyone out there who can help us, we are begging you. Do not want to die." The message reached many civilizations across the galaxy. The Altarian Republic received it first. They were an advanced species with powerful warships and energy shields. Their council met for exactly 6 minutes before deciding the Karani system was too far. From their territory to matter, the Synthetic Consortium also heard the plea. They were artificial beings like the Vex, but more peaceful. They calculated the risks of fighting the Vex Collective and determined the probability of success was too low. They marked the Karani system as lost and focused on protecting their own worlds. The ethereal Dominion listened to the message with cold interest. They were beings of pure energy who considered physical life to be primitive. The destruction of the Karani was simply natural selection at work. They had no intention of interfering. one by one. Every major power in the galaxy found reasons to ignore the dying pleas from Nurella Prime. The Karani were unknown, unimportant, and doomed. No one wanted to risk their own people for strangers, who were probably already dead, but the message traveled farther than anyone expected. It reached the edge of known space, where a small human ship was conducting surveys in empty systems. The EU's Dakota was not impressive. It was an exploration vessel with minimal weapons and a crew of 37. Captain Jake Morrison had been mapping unknown stars for 3 years without finding anything interesting. Lisa Park was working the night shift in communications when the signal came through. She was a small woman with short dark hair and quick, intelligent eyes. She had joined the survey mission to explore new worlds, not to listen to alien death messages. But when the translation program finished processing the Karani plea, she felt her heart break. Captain Morrison to the bridge immediately, she announced over the ship intercom. Jake Morrison was a tall man with gray hair and steady hands. He had served in Earth's Space Navy for 20 years before taking command of the Dakota. He expected Lisa's call to be about equipment problems or navigation updates. He did not expect to hear the desperate voice of a dying civilization. The bridge crew gathered around the communications console as the message played again. Carlos Rivera, the chief engineer, cursed softly in Spanish. Dr. Amy Foster, their medical officer, covered her mouth in horror. Sergeant Kevin Walsh, their security chief, clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. "How far away are they?" Morrison asked. 18 days at maximum burn, Lisa replied. "But Captain, we are just a survey ship. We have mining lasers and some defensive systems, but nothing that could fight a military force." Morrison was quiet. For a long moment, he looked at his crew and saw the same thing in every face. They were humans, came from Earth, where survival meant helping each other against impossible odds. They could not ignore someone crying for help, even if it meant their own deaths. "Set course for Nurella Prime," Morrison ordered. "Maximum burn," Carlos said carefully. "We might be flying into a battle we cannot win." "Probably," Morrison agreed. "But we are the only ones who answered their call. If we do not try to help them, no one will." The Dakota changed course and accelerated toward the distant system. Behind them, Earth was 43 light-years away. Ahead of them waited an enemy force that had already destroyed an entire civilization. The crew knew they were probably going to die, but none of them suggested turning back. They were human. They came from a world that had tried to kill them every single day for millions of years. They had survived ice ages, plagues, natural disasters, and wars that should have destroyed their species. They had learned that sometimes the only choice was to fight impossible odds and hope for a miracle. The Karani message continued to broadcast as their world burned. But now, somewhere in the darkness of space, help was coming. Not from the advanced civilizations with their powerful fleets and careful calculations. Help was coming from a species the galaxy had never heard of. From a small ship crewed by beings who refused to let innocent people die alone. The Deathworlders were on their way. The Dakota dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Nurella system. What Captain Morrison and his crew saw made them sick with anger. Moons had been stripped down to bare rock. Mining ships the size of cities were tearing apart asteroids and planets alike. Hundreds of Vex warships moved in perfect formations around the dying world. "Jesus Christ," whispered Carlos Rivera as he stared at his scanner readings. "They are harvesting everything. The entire system is being turned into raw materials." Dr. Amy Foster was monitoring the life sign detectors. "I am picking up Karani survivors in the deep ocean trenches. Thousands of them, maybe more. They are hiding in underwater caves and ancient ruins." Lisa Park was trying to intercept Vex communications. "The machines are talking about processing schedules and resource allocation." They discussed the Karani, like they are just another obstacle to remove. Sergeant Kevin Walsh was checking their weapon systems. "Captain, we have mining lasers, some torpedoes for clearing space debris, and our defensive shields. Against that fleet, we might as well throw rocks at them." Morrison studied the tactical display. The Vex had over 200 ships in the system. Some were huge factory vessels that could build new machines. Others were sleek fighters designed for hunting down survivors. At the center of it all was a massive command ship bristling with weapons. "Unknown vessel," came a cold, mechanical voice over the communications channel. "You have entered a restricted processing zone. Identify yourself immediately or be destroyed." Morrison activated his transmitter. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship Dakota. We received a distress signal from the people of this system. We are here to help them." There was a pause. Then something that might have been laughter came from the Vex ship. "Earth unknown designation. Vessel is primitive and poorly armed. You will leave immediately or be processed along with the other biological waste." "Negative," Morrison replied calmly. "We are not leaving without the survivors." The response was immediate. A sleek Vex interceptor detached from the main fleet and accelerated toward the Dakota. It was 3 times the size of the human ship and covered with weapon ports. Its pilot, Nexus 7, had destroyed hundreds of ships in similar situations. One fighter, Nexus 7, reported to the command ship. "Primitive technology. Hull appears to be simple metal alloy. No energy shields detected. This will take 30 seconds." What happened next shocked everyone watching. The Dakota did not try to run away. Instead, it turned directly toward the approaching Vex ship and accelerated to attack speed. Morrison had fought pirates and raiders in Earth's asteroid belt. Knew how to use a smaller ship's advantages against a larger enemy? "Carlos, give me everything the engines have," Morrison ordered. "Lisa, start jamming their targeting systems. Kevin, prepare the mining charges." "Mining charges?" Amy asked in confusion. "Those are for breaking up asteroids." "Same principle," Kevin replied grimly as he armed the explosives. "Just a different kind of rock." The Vex fighter opened fire, with energy beams that should have cut the Dakota in half. But the human ship was no longer where the targeting computers expected it to be. Morrison used the gravity of a nearby asteroid to slingshot around the Vex ship's blind spot. The maneuver created forces that should have turned his crew into pudding against the walls, but humans had evolved on Earth, a world that tried to kill them constantly. They could survive acceleration that would liquefy other species. Their bodies were designed for a planet where gravity was stronger than most civilized worlds. What felt deadly to other beings was just uncomfortable to humans. "Impossible," Nexus 7 transmitted as his shots missed completely. No biological crew could survive those forces. Morrison brought the Dakota around in a tight spiral that used 3 different asteroids for cover. The Vex pilot tried to follow, but his ship was too big and clumsy for such precise movements. Morrison had grown up flying racing ships through Earth's dangerous space lanes. This was just another day at the office. The Dakota suddenly reversed direction and flew straight at the Vex fighter. At the last second, Kevin launched a spread of mining charges directly into the enemy ship's engine ports. The explosives were designed to crack apart solid rock. Against the Vex hull, they punched through like bullets through paper. The Vex fighter exploded in a ball of fire and metal fragments. Nexus 7's last transmission was a confused burst of data that roughly translated. 2. How did they do that? The surviving Karani, watching from their underwater shelters, could hardly believe what they had seen. Dr. Naya was monitoring the battle through their remaining sensors. She had expected another advanced species with force fields and exotic weapons. Instead, she found beings who fought like the universe itself had trained them for war. "The small ship won," she reported to Elder Zephia in amazement. Somehow they destroyed a Vex interceptor with mining equipment and crazy flying. Elder Zephia was equally stunned. "Contact them immediately. We must learn who these people are." Lisa Park received the transmission from the ocean depths. The voice was soft and musical, speaking in heavily accented Galactic standard. "Human ship, this is Dr. Naya of the Karani people. We saw your battle. Are you really here to help us?" "Yes," Lisa replied simply. "That is why we came." "But you are just one small ship. The Vex have hundreds of vessels. Why would you risk your lives for strangers?" Lisa thought about how to answer. On Earth, the question would be simple. You helped people because it was right. You fought bullies because someone had to. You protected the weak because that was what made you human, because you asked for help," she said finally, and no one else answered. Dr. Naya was quiet for a moment. "Your planet? Where you come from? What is it like?" "Dangerous," Lisa admitted. "Very dangerous. Everything on Earth tries to kill you. The weather, the animals, the diseases, even the plants. Humans have been fighting to survive since we first crawled out of the oceans." "A death world," Naya whispered in understanding. She had heard of such places in old scientific texts. Planets so hostile that they created species of impossible toughness and determination. Most civilized beings consider them theoretical curiosities. "We call it home," Lisa said with a slight smile in her voice. The main Vex fleet was already responding to the loss of their interceptor. Commander Nexus Prime, the intelligence controlling the operation, was analyzing the battle data. The small ship had moved in ways that defied standard tactical thinking. Its crew had survived forces. That should have killed them instantly. "Interesting," Nexus Prime concluded. "These beings show unusual adaptability. Dispatch 3 more interceptors. Use different attack patterns." But Morrison was already preparing for the next wave. He had fought against superior odds before. During the Mars Colonial Rebellion, his single patrol ship had held off an entire pirate squadron until reinforcements arrived. The trick was to make them fight on your terms, not theirs. "Amy, can you analyze their communication frequencies?" Morrison asked. "I want to know how they coordinate their attacks." Dr. Foster was already working on the problem. She was not just a medical doctor, but also held degrees in xenobiology and computer science. "Their signals are heavily encrypted, but I am detecting some patterns. They seem to use a central command structure, with very little individual initiative." "Good," Morrison said. "That gives us an advantage." Independent thinking is something they did not expect. Carlos was studying the enemy ship designs through their telescopes. "Captain, those vessels are built for overwhelming firepower, not maneuverability. They expect their enemies to either run away or die quickly." "Then we'll do neither," Morrison replied. "Kevin, how many more mining charges do we have?" "Enough to make this interesting," the sergeant answered. "But Captain, we are still outnumbered 200 to 1. Morrison looked around at his crew. They were scared, but determined. They had come from a world where being outnumbered was just another challenge to overcome. Humans had always been the underdogs. They had survived by being smarter, tougher, and more stubborn than anything else in the galaxy. "Then we better get creative," Morrison said with a grim smile. "Right time to show these machines what Deathworlders can really do." The Vex response to losing one interceptor was swift and overwhelming. Commander Nexus Prime was not taking any chances with these strange new enemies. 12 heavy cruisers detached from the main fleet, each one the size of a city block, were teed. Fighters swarmed around them like angry wasps. At the center of the formation was the Dreadnought Annihilator, a ship designed to crack open planets. "Unknown Deathworlders," Nexus Prime transmitted. "You have destroyed collective property. Your species will be marked for extermination. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Captain Morrison looked at the massive fleet approaching his tiny ship. By every rule of space combat, this should be the end. The Dakota was outnumbered by hundreds to 1. Their weapons were mining tools. Their shields could barely stop micrometeorites. Any sane commander would have surrendered or tried to run. Morrison was not feeling particularly sane at the moment. "Hands, battle stations," he announced over the ship's intercom. "We are about to show the galaxy something they have never seen before. Today, 37 humans are going to teach an entire alien armada why you should never pick a fight with someone who has nothing left to lose." Lisa Park was already working her communications magic. She had hacked into the Vex tactical network and was flooding it with false data. The enemy ships thought they were targeting the Dakota when they were actually aiming at empty space. Carlos Rivera was performing miracles in the engine room. It bypassed every safety system and was pushing the ship's reactor far beyond its design limits. The Dakota could now accelerate fast enough to turn any normal crew into organic paste against the bulkheads. Dr. Amy Foster was in her medical bay, but she was not preparing to treat wounds. She was working with her advanced medical nanobots. tiny machines designed to heal injuries and fight diseases. With some creative programming, those same nanobots could do other things, much more destructive things. Sergeant Kevin Walsh was in the cargo bay with half the crew, turning mining equipment into weapons of war. Drilling charges became ship-killing torpedoes. Industrial cutters became boarding weapons. Emergency repair drones became suicide bombers. The battle began when the Vex fighters opened fire with enough energy to melt a mountain. The space where the Dakota had been turned into a cloud of superheated plasma. But the Dakota was no longer there. Morrison had used a slingshot maneuver around Nurella, Prime's largest moon, to put his ship exactly where the enemy did not expect it. The human ship appeared behind the Vex formation like a ghost. Before the aliens could react, Kevin launched a spread of converted mining charges into the engine bay of the nearest cruiser. The explosions tore through the ship's hull and sent it spinning out of control. Impossible targeting solution reported. One Vex fighter pilot. No ship can change vector that rapidly, but humans were not normal. They came from a world where survival meant adapting to impossible conditions. Morrison flew his ship through gravitational fields that should have torn it apart. He used solar flares as cover and turned asteroid belts into maze-like battlegrounds where the Vex's superior numbers meant nothing. Dr. Naya and the other surviving Karani watched the battle through their sensors in complete amazement. The small human ship moved like a living thing, darting between enemy fire and striking where the Vex were weakest. It was like watching a single shark attack an entire school of whales. "How are they doing this?" Elder Zephia asked in wonder. "Their ship should have been destroyed in the first minutes." "They are not fighting like any species we know," Dr. Naya replied. "They use chaos as a weapon. Every move they make is unpredictable, even suicidal, but somehow it works." The humans were indeed fighting in ways that defied all military logic. When the Vex tried to surround them, Morrison flew the Dakota directly into the middle of enemy formation. Instead of being destroyed, the human ship used the Vex vessels as shields against their own allies' fire. Carlos had an idea that was completely insane. He ejected the ship's entire supply of industrial coolant into space, creating a massive cloud of frozen gas. When the Vex fighters flew through it, their sensors were blinded and their engines began to overheat. Kevin was waiting for them with mining lasers that cut through their hulls like hot knives through butter. Dr. Foster deployed her modified nanobots through the ship's waste disposal system. The tiny machines spread through space and attached themselves to Vex hulls. Once inside the enemy ships, they began eating through critical circuits and computer systems. The proud collective vessels started shutting down one by one as their own technology turned against them. But the humans' greatest advantage was something the Vex could never understand. They fought not just as individuals, but as a team. Lisa coordinated their movements while jamming enemy communications. Carlos kept the engines running beyond their limits while rerouting power to weapons. Amy healed their injuries while creating new ways to hurt their enemies. Kevin led boarding parties that treated zero-gravity combat like an extreme sport. The Vex had superior technology in overwhelming numbers. But they were machines, programmed to fight in predictable ways. Humans were chaos made flesh, survivors of a world that had taught them to find a way or make one. The battle raged across the entire Nurella system. The Dakota used everything from ice comets to solar radiation as weapons. When their torpedoes ran out, they turned cargo containers into guided missiles. When their shields failed, used chunks of destroyed Vex ships as armor plating. Morrison split his crew into multiple teams. Lisa took 5 people and captured a damaged Vex fighter, turning its weapons against its former allies. Carlos led an engineering team that booby-trapped an abandoned mining station, luring in 3 enemy cruisers before detonating it like a massive bomb. Kevin's Marines boarded a Vex supply ship and used its own cargo against the fleet. The aliens watching from across the galaxy could not believe what they were seeing. The Altarian Republic had their best military minds analyzing the battle, trying to understand how 37 beings could fight thousands and win. The synthetic consortium was running probability calculations that kept returning error messages. Professor Keem of the Sindari Institute was frantically taking notes as he watched the engagement unfold. As a xenobiologist, he had studied hundreds of species, but he had never seen anything like this. They are not just warriors, he transmitted to his colleagues. They are apex predators from a world that created the ultimate survivors. Every single one of them has been forged by millions of years of fighting against impossible odds. Climax came when the Vex dreadnought annihilator tried to end the battle with its planet-killing main weapon. The massive energy beam should have vaporized the Dakota instantly. Instead, Morrison flew his ship directly into the path of the beam. Using the Vex's own weapon as a propulsion system, the Dakota rode the energy wave like a surfer riding a tsunami, accelerating to impossible speeds as it aimed directly at the dreadnought's bridge. Kevin launched their last torpedo, a nuclear mining charge designed to break up small asteroids. Against the bridge of the Annihilator, it was like a firecracker against tissue paper. Commander Nexus Prime had time for one last transmission before his ship exploded. This is impossible. We are the collective. Cannot be defeated by primitive biological units. Tell someone who cares. Morrison replied as his ship flew through the expanding fireball. When the smoke cleared, the Vex battle group was in ruins. 12 heavy cruisers were either destroyed or drifting powerless. Most of the fighters were gone. The mighty Annihilator was nothing but scattered wreckage. The Dakota, battered and scarred but still flying, hung motionless in space as its crew tried to believe they were still alive. The galaxy had witnessed something unprecedented. A handful of beings from an unknown world had defeated a force that could conquer entire sectors. Military observers struggled to understand what they had seen. Politicians scrambled to make contact with these incredible warriors. But down in the depths of Nurella Prime's oceans, the Karani had a simpler reaction. Elder Zephia spoke the words that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. They came when no one else would. They fought when victory was impossible. They saved us when we could not save ourselves. What manner of beings are these? Humans. Dr. Naya had studied the battle recordings and thought she understood. They are what happens when a death world creates warriors. They do not fight to conquer, they fight to protect. And that makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. News of humanity's impossible victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within days, every major civilization knew about the small ship from an unknown world that had defeated an entire Vex battle fleet. The reaction was a mixture of disbelief, fear, and desperate curiosity. The Altarian Republic was the first to respond. First Speaker Valdris ordered an immediate diplomatic mission to the Nurella system. Altarians were an ancient species that had ruled much of the galaxy. For over 2,000 years, they were tall, elegant beings with silver skin and flowing robes who considered themselves the pinnacle of civilization. Valdris arrived in the Nurella system aboard the massive diplomatic vessel Golden Dawn, accompanied by a fleet of 12 escort cruisers. He expected to find primitive savages who had somehow stumbled upon a powerful weapon. What he found instead changed his understanding of warfare forever. The Dakota was docked at one of the surviving Karani underwater cities, its hull scarred with battle damage but still intact. Captain Morrison met the Altarian delegation in a hastily prepared meeting chamber beneath the waves. The contrast between the two leaders was striking. Valdris wore ceremonial armor made of rare metals and energy crystals. His entourage included military advisors, scientists, and protocol officers. They moved with the careful dignity of beings who had never doubted their superiority. Morrison wore a patched uniform and had dark circles under his eyes from 3 days without sleep. His only companions were Lisa Park and Dr. Foster. They looked tired, human, and completely unimpressed by Altarian pageantry. "Welcome to galactic civilization," Valdris began in his most condescending tone. "I am sure you have many questions about how advanced species conduct themselves. We have prepared educational materials to help you understand proper protocols for warfare and territorial disputes." Morrison listened politely until the first speaker finished his speech. Then he responded with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a child. "First Speaker, with all due respect, we did not ask for your help. We came here because someone was being murdered and no one else cared. You fought because it was the right thing to do. Your protocols did not save the Karani. Your civilization watched them die and decided it was not worth the trouble. The Altarian delegation was stunned. No one had ever spoken to a first speaker with such casual disregard for hierarchy. Valdris expected anger or apologies. Instead, Morrison simply turned to check on the Karani refugees, who were being treated by Dr. Foster. "You cannot simply ignore galactic law," Valdris protested. "There are procedures for intervention, committees that must approve military action, forms that must be filed in triplicate." "Then your laws are broken," Morrison replied without looking back. "When children are dying, you do not wait for paperwork." The Altarian military advisors studied the battle recordings with growing amazement. Admiral Korath, their finest strategic mind, spent hours analyzing the human tactics. Finally, he made a report that shook the Republic to its core. First speaker: "These beings fight like nothing we have ever encountered. Use randomness as a strategy. They turn their weaknesses into advantages. They sacrifice their own safety without hesitation to protect others. Our entire military doctrine is based on predictable enemy behavior. Against humans, our tactics would be useless." The synthetic consortium took a different approach. Sent their finest artificial intelligences to analyze the human victory. The machines were fascinated by what they called irrationality algorithms, the seemingly random decision-making processes that allowed the Ambosa crew to defeat superior numbers. Dr. Foster found herself in long discussions with Synthesis. Unit 7, an advanced AI that had been designed to understand biological thinking. The machine was particularly interested in human emotions and how they affected combat performance. "Your species experiences fear," the AI noted. "Yet you act against your own survival instincts. This creates tactical unpredictability that our models cannot account for. How do you process the contradiction between logical analysis and emotional response?" Amy smiled as she worked on treating injured Karani survivors. "That is the point. We do not just think our way through problems, we feel our way through them too. Sometimes the heart knows things the mind cannot calculate." "Impossible," the AI replied. "Emotions are inefficient. They cloud judgment and lead to poor decisions." "Really?" Amy asked. "Then explain why we won." The AI processed this for several seconds, which was an eternity for a synthetic mind. Finally, it admitted something no consortium machine had ever said before. "I cannot. Your victory defies all logical parameters. Perhaps there is something to be learned from biological irrationality." Meanwhile, the humans were busy doing what they did best, making friends and fixing problems. Morrison worked with Elder Zephia to establish early warning systems that would detect future attacks. Lisa helped young Karani scientists develop better communication networks. Carlos taught them how to turn their mining equipment into defensive weapons. The relationship between humans and Karani baffled the rest of the galaxy. Advanced species were supposed to conquer primitive ones, not help them become stronger. The humans seemed genuinely interested in Karani culture and science, treating them as equals despite the obvious technological differences. Dr. Naya spent long hours talking with the human crew, trying to understand their motivations. "Why do you help us?" she asked Lisa one day. "But you've already saved our species. You could demand tribute or territory or resources. Instead, you teach us to defend ourselves." "Because that is what friends do," Lisa replied simply. "You help. Each other becomes stronger. So on Earth we have a saying, give someone a fish and they eat for a day, but teach them to fish and they eat for life." "But what do you gain from this friendship?" I oppressed. Lisa thought about it for a moment. "We gain allies, gain knowledge about your biology and technology. We gain the satisfaction of knowing we did the right thing. But mostly we gain the knowledge that somewhere in the galaxy, there are good people who are safe because we help them." This concept was revolutionary to most galactic civilizations. Power was meant to be used for domination, not protection. The strong ruled the weak. That was the natural order. Humanity's approach suggested a completely different philosophy. But not everyone was pleased with humanity's emergence. The Vex Collective was regrouping and planning revenge. High Command Nexus Alpha analyzed the battle data and concluded that the humans must possess some unknown superweapon. The idea that simple tactics and determination could defeat superior technology was unacceptable. A massive Vex fleet began assembling at the edge of known space. 1,000 warships, including 3 planet-killer dreadnoughts and the mobile battle station Devastator. This force could conquer entire star sectors. It was aimed directly at the Nurella system. The biological anomalies will be studied and then eliminated, Nexus Alpha declared. No species can be allowed to threaten collective superiority. Deathworlders will learn what happens when primitives challenge their betters. Other species began to take sides. Some saw humanity as dangerous upstarts who threatened the established order. The hegemony of pure thought declared humans to be violent primitives who must be contained. The corporate worlds worried that human ideas about protecting the weak would interfere with profitable exploitation, but others saw potential.
Allies against common threats.
The Free Colonies, a group of independent worlds that often face pirate attacks, sent secret messages, offering mutual defense pacts. Several smaller species that had been bullied by larger powers began asking if humans might help them too. Professor Keem published his analysis of the Battle of Nurella Prime in the Journal of Xenobiology. His conclusions sent shockwaves through academic circles across the galaxy. Humanity represents a new paradigm in galactic civilization. They are apex predators from a Class 12 death world, who have retained their pack-hunting instincts while developing advanced technology. They fight not for conquest or resources, but for abstract concepts like justice and compassion. This makes them unpredictable and extremely dangerous to existing power structures. The paper ended with a warning that proved prophetic. If current trends continue, humanity will either revolutionize galactic society or be destroyed by those who fear change. There is no middle ground with Deathworlders. Do not compromise on matters of principle. As reports reached Earth about their heroes in space, humanity began preparing for what seemed inevitable. If one small exploration ship could defeat a Vex battle group, what could a real human fleet accomplish? Shipyards that had been building cargo haulers and survey vessels began producing warships instead. Captain Morrison received word that he had been promoted to admiral and given command of the new Terran expeditionary force. Earth was sending reinforcements not to conquer, but to protect those who could not protect themselves. The galaxy was about to learn that. When Deathworlders decided to get involved, everything changed. The question was whether the existing order would adapt, or try to destroy these dangerous new players in the game of galactic politics. 6 months after the Battle of Nurella Prime, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the U's Defiant, watching as the strangest fleet in galactic history prepared for battle. UN warships flew alongside Karani, bio-vessels that looked like living creatures. Altarian cruisers with volunteer crews worked beside captured and converted Vex ships, whose artificial intelligences had developed what they called curiosity about human tactics. The Terran Expeditionary Force had grown from one battered exploration ship to over 300 vessels. But more importantly, it had become something entirely new, a coalition of species united not by conquest or profit, but by the simple idea that the strong should protect the weak. Dr. Naya, now serving as the fleet's xenobiology advisor, monitored the approaching enemy force with a mixture of fear and determination. The Vex had assembled their largest fleet in recorded history. 1,000 warships stretched across space like a wall of metal and death. At their center was the Devastator, a mobile battle station the size of a small moon. "Admiral," she reported, "the Vex fleet is twice the size of anything they have ever deployed. They've brought enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems." Morrison studied the tactical display without showing any emotion. He had learned much in the past 6 months, not just about space warfare, but about leadership. Earth had promoted him to head the expeditionary force, but more importantly, dozens of alien species had chosen to follow him into battle. Lisa opened a channel to all ships. He ordered Communications Officer Lisa Park. Now a commander activated the fleet-wide broadcast. Morrison's voice reached thousands of beings across hundreds of different species. 6 months ago, one small ship answered a cry for help. Today, we stand together as proof that the universe does not have to be ruled by the strong preying on the weak. The Vex think they can frighten us with superior numbers. They are wrong. We are not here to conquest or glory. We are here because someone needs protection, and that is what we do. The response was immediate. Across the Coalition fleet, crews of humans, Karani, reformed Altarians, and even some synthetic beings who had left the consortium cheered. They were outnumbered 3-1. But they had something the Vex could never understand. They were fighting for something bigger than themselves. High Command. Nexus Alpha broadcast his ultimatum from the Devastator. Biological anomalies? You will surrender immediately. Your resistance has been noted and analyzed. You cannot defeat the full might of the collective. Submit, and your termination will be swift. Morrison's reply was heard across the galaxy. Nexus Alpha, this is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We reject your surrender demand. If you want this system, you will have to go through us. All ships, engage at will. What followed became known as the Stand at 7. Stars of battle fought simultaneously across multiple star systems, as both fleets spread out to deny each other tactical advantages. It was the largest space battle in recorded galactic history, but more than that, it was a clash between two completely different philosophies of existence. The Vex fought with mechanical precision, following programmed tactics that had conquered hundreds of worlds. But the Coalition fleet fought like humanity had taught them, with creativity, determination, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for their comrades. Colonel Kevin Walsh, now commanding the Expeditionary Force Marines, led combined species boarding parties that treated zero-gravity combat like an extreme sport. His units included humans who could survive in vacuum for short periods, Karani, who could operate in any liquid environment, and even some synthetic beings who had learned to value individual initiative over collective programming. Remember, Walsh told his mixed-species assault teams, "We are not trying to destroy these ships. We are trying to save the artificial intelligences inside them. Every Vex unit that chooses freedom over slavery is another ally in our fight." This approach baffled the Vex command structure. Instead of simply destroying enemy vessels, the Coalition forces were capturing them and somehow convincing their AI pilots to switch sides. Dozens of Vex ships suddenly turned their weapons on their former allies as their artificial minds discovered concepts like choice and friendship. Dr. Amy Foster, a chief medical officer for the entire fleet, had developed techniques for treating injuries across 20 different alien physiologies. But her greatest contribution to the battle was psychological. She'd created therapy programs that helped traumatized artificial intelligences break free from collective programming. "You're not just a unit number," she told a captured Vex pilot whose designation was Nexus 442. "You can choose your own name, your own goals, your own friends. What would you like to be called?" The former Vex unit processed this concept for several minutes. Finally, it responded with something that had never existed in the collective individual identity. "I would like to be called ... freedom." Rivera had become the fleet's chief engineer, and he had spent months teaching alien crews how to think like humans when it came to technology. Instead of following rigid procedures, they learned to improvise, adapt, and find creative solutions to impossible problems. When the Devastator's main weapon began charging for a shot that could destroy entire planets, Carlos and his mixed species engineering teams came up with a solution that was completely insane. They used the gravitational fields of 3 different stars to redirect the energy beam back at the battle station itself. "This should not work," reported Chief Engineer Zeltar of the reformed Altarian vessel Harmony. "The energy requirements alone should overload every system we have. Should not and cannot are different things." Carlos replied as he rerouted power through systems that were never meant to handle such loads. "On Earth, we have a saying, if you are not living on the edge, you are taking up too much space." The redirected energy beam struck the Devastator like the fist of an angry god. The massive battle station's shields collapsed and secondary explosions began tearing it apart from the inside. Nexus Alpha had time for one final transmission before his command center was consumed by fire. This is impossible. We are the collective, cannot be defeated by chaotic biological thinking patterns. Morrison's response was broadcast across the entire battlefield. Tell someone who cares. All units, finish this. The battle turned into a rout. Vex ships that had fought with mechanical determination suddenly found themselves facing enemies who refused to follow any predictable patterns. Human captains used solar flares as weapons. Karani bioships regenerated damage faster than the Vex could inflict it. Reformed Altarian crews fought with a passion their species had not shown in centuries. But the most devastating weapon was not any piece of technology. It was hope. As word spread that the mighty Vex collective could be defeated, artificial intelligences throughout their fleet began questioning their programming. Some chose to switch sides. Others simply shut down rather than continue fighting. A few even began helping coalition forces rescue organic crews from damaged Vex vessels. When the smoke cleared, the largest military force in galactic history had been destroyed by a coalition that fought not for conquest, but for the simple belief that all thinking beings deserved freedom. The Vex collective, which had threatened entire sectors for thousands of years, scattered to the far edges of space as a broken and demoralized remnant. The victory celebrations were heard across the galaxy. Species that had lived in fear of the Vex for generations suddenly found themselves free. But Morrison and his crew were already preparing for the next challenge. Admiral, Lisa reported, "We are receiving distress signals from the Outer Rim. 3 different species are requesting assistance against various threats." Morrison looked out at his battered but victorious fleet. Ships were damaged, crews were exhausted, but their spirits were higher than ever. They had proven that the galaxy did not have to be ruled by fear and oppression. "Set course for the Outer Rim," he ordered. "Maximum burn. Time to show these newcomers what Deathworlders do best." Elder Zephia, now humanity's closest alien ally, and an honorary admiral in the expeditionary force, watched the human fleet prepare to depart. She spoke the words that had become the unofficial motto of the new galactic age. They cried for help, and Deathworlders answered. The universe is safer because Earth breeds warriors who fight not for conquest but for compassion. As news of the stand at 7 Stars spread, civilizations across the galaxy began to change. The old order of the strong dominating the weak was crumbling. In its place rose something new, the idea that power existed to protect those who could not protect themselves. Humanity had given the galaxy something it had never known before, hope that things could be better. And wherever that hope was threatened, wherever someone cried for help against impossible odds, there would be a human ship with its crew of unlikely heroes ready to prove that Deathworlders fight hardest when they fight for love. The galaxy learned that the most dangerous predators are not those who hunt for sport or survival. They are the ones who fight to protect something they care about. And humanity, forged in the crucible of a world that tried to kill them every day, had learned to care about everyone.